We offer the trust to the heavens, the earth, and the mountains, but they refuse to bear it, and we're afraid of it. But man undertook it. He is indeed unjust and ignorant.
Right. So those two verses, they close out Surah Al-Ahzab, which is the 33rd chapter of the Quran.
To really grasp the sheer weight of that cosmic drama I just described, we have to look at the immediate context.
Exactly, because Surah Al-Ahzab is one of the most densely packed, social demanding chapters in the entire text. I mean, you read through it, and it is this grueling, meticulous blueprint of social reforms.
Yeah, it's all over the place. Legalities of adoption, strict regulations for household conduct.
Battle instructions during a literal siege.
Right. And the incredibly complex dynamics of, hypocrisy in a fragile, nascent society. It is essentially a heavy legal and social document.
It is, and yet it doesn't conclude with a summary of those laws.
Right.
It doesn't offer, a comforting consolation to the people struggling to implement them, nor does it end with a final booming command. It zooms all the way out.
It zooms way out.
It ends with an ontological statement, a fundamental assertion about the architecture of reality and what makes the human being uniquely dangerous and uniquely significant within that reality.
I'm going to stop right there, because the contrast you're pointing out is jarring.
Yeah.
You have pages and pages of essentially administrative and social law, like how to handle a divorce, how to organize a community under threat, and then suddenly we are hurled into this vast cosmic theater where the heavens and the earth are trembling before something called the trust.
Right. It's a massive shift.
It almost reads like a sudden shift into mythology. So the immediate question, the one that anchors everything we are going to look at today through the lens of Allama Parwez's work, is what exactly is this trust?
The Amanah.
Yes, the Amanah. What is it? Because if it's terrifying enough to make a mountain flinch, it can't just be about, keeping a secret for a friend.
Exactly. And the thing is, the traditional interpretation of this verse has, for centuries, treated it precisely like the mythological narrative you just mentioned.
Like a literal thing.
Right. The classical literalist reading essentially argues that God physically held out an object, a literal trust to the physical universe.
Like a glowing orb or something.
Basically, yeah. And the universe, the stars, the tectonic plates, the mountains looked at this object, became terrified of the responsibility, and out of a sense of disobedience or sheer cowardice, refused to accept it.
Oh, wow.
And then, according to this narrative, the human being foolishly steps forward, volunteers to take it, and God responds by condemning humanity as inherently unjust and ignorant for making such an arrogant mistake.
Wait, I have to push back on that classical reading immediately, because the logic of it feels deeply flawed, especially if we are taking the Quran's own descriptions of the universe seriously.
Right.
Because if we accept that literal story, that the mountains were offered something and just said no, we are accepting a universe where inanimate objects possess the capacity to rebel against their creator.
Yeah, you're picturing an omnipotent king whose own rocks are staging a protest.
Exactly.
Which is absurd. And that is exactly where Allama Parwez begins his critique. He completely strips away this centuries-old mythological veneer and applies a fiercely rational structural analysis to the text.
Okay, so how does he break it down?
Well, he argues that if you look at the internal logic of the Quran, the physical universe absolutely does not possess the capacity to rebel, period.
Because it's fixed.
Yes. There are numerous other verses that explicitly define the operational nature of the cosmos. The celestial bodies, the weather systems, the mountains, they operate on fixed, immutable laws.
Right.
The text uses very specific Arabic terminology for this. La yastakbirun, meaning they are incapable of exhibiting arrogance or stepping out of their designated bounds.
Okay.
And la yastastarun, meaning they do not experience fatigue or tire of their functions.
That makes me think of software architecture.
How so?
Well, the universe in this framework isn't a collection of independent agents deciding what to do every morning. It's an incredibly complex, closed-loop system.
Yeah.
It's like an NPC, a non-player character in a video game.
Yeah.
An NPC doesn't obey the rules of the game out of loyalty or fear, right?
Right. It has no choice.
It obeys because it literally has no code to do anything else.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the programming to rebel.
That is a perfect modern equivalent. They are entirely deterministic. The universe functions with absolute, terrifying precision, precisely because nature cannot disobey.
So the planets aren't choosing to orbit.
No. Think about the cosmological constant, or the precise rate of the universe's expansion. If the gravitational pull of the Earth or the trajectory of the Earth around the sun were altered by a microscopic fraction,
We'd all be dead.
yeah, the result wouldn't be a minor inconvenience. It would be the total catastrophic collapse of the physical universe as we know it. The structural integrity of reality depends entirely on nature's absolute mechanical compliance to these physical laws.
Right, so if nature is structurally, mathematically incapable of disobedience, how could it possibly refuse a direct command?
It couldn't, not in the sense of a willful rebellion. Therefore, Parwaz argues, the refusal mentioned in the verse has to be understood completely differently.
So what does refusal mean then?
The mountains didn't arrogantly say no. They refused in the sense that they structurally lacked the capacity to absorb what was being offered.
Oh, I see.
If I ask you to run a modern, highly complex software program on a calculator from 1985, the calculator isn't rebelling against you when it fails.
Yeah, it crashes.
Right. It simply doesn't have the hardware for the task. It structurally refuses the input.
Okay, I follow the logic there. But if the trust isn't a physical object and the refusal isn't a conscious rebellion, we're left staring into a void. What is the Amanah?
This is the core of it.
Yeah, if the mountains lack the hardware for it, what is the software that only humans seem to be able to run?
To understand that, we have to dig into the linguistic roots of the word Amanah. And this is where Parwaz's structural approach really shines. He goes back to the root Arabic letters A-M-N. Now, this is the exact same root for the word iman, which is almost universally translated in religious texts as faith or belief.
Which usually means something very mystical.
Exactly. But Parwaz strips away all the mystical, theological sentimentality that has attached itself to that word over the centuries.
So what did it mean originally?
In its purest, classical, desert Arabic origin, the root AMN does not mean blindly believing in something you can't see. It means conviction. It means establishing security. It means immense structural reliability.
Yeah, that distinction is crucial. It's not just trustworthiness in the casual way we use it today.
Right.
It's not, hey, I trust you to watch my dog while I'm out of town.
Far from it. Parwaz draws a very sharp line here. He explicitly contrasts the concept of Amanah with a passive state of peace.
How so?
He argues that many people think of peace simply as the absence of conflict, but the absence of conflict is the peace of a graveyard.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it is the peace of two silent stones sitting in a desert that never clash because they never move and have absolutely no agency.
So it's a dead peace.
Exactly. That is a negative definition of peace. Amanah, derived from amen, is intensely positive, active, and heavy. It is the state of being structurally sound enough to bear immense weight without buckling.
I was actually looking at the linguistic examples from classical Arabic that Parwaz uses to illustrate this, and they are incredibly visceral.
Oh, they really are.
You have to remember the environment where this language was forged. The 7th century Arabian desert was a place of extreme scarcity and constant physical danger. Language evolves around survival.
Yes.
So if a word means reliable in that context, it literally means we'll keep you alive.
The vocabulary of the desert is incredibly pragmatic. What example stood out to you?
2 of them really hit home. The first is Nakatun Amun.
Ah, yes.
This refers to a very specific type of camel. If you're crossing a vast, lethal stretch of desert, you don't just take any camel, you need a Nakatun Amun.
Because the wrong camel will get you killed.
Exactly. This is a highly reliable beast of burden that does not stumble on treacherous terrain. It doesn't get spooked by a sudden noise and throw its rider.
Right.
And crucially, it does not suffer from unexpected fatigue and just sit down in the middle of the sand dunes, essentially condemning you both to death. You can place your absolute security, your life, on the structural integrity and endurance of this animal.
It represents an unbroken, reliable chain in an environment where a broken chain is fatal.
Precisely. And the second example is even more mechanical. Or waqtul wuthqa. It translates to the most trustworthy, unbreakable handhold or rope.
The well analogy.
Yes. Imagine you are drawing water from a deep, ancient well. You have a massive, heavy bucket, you drop it down, let it fill with water, and then you have to lean over the edge of the well and pull that dead weight all the way back up.
Which takes incredible physical effort.
And the classical Arabs had a specific phrase for when that rope snaps, kanati rasha, which literally translates to the rope committed treason. It betrayed you.
Because the consequences of that failure are disastrous.
Right. Not only do you lose the life-saving water, But the sudden release of tension as you're pulling with all your body weight could send you plunging headfirst into the darkness of the well.
So it's about holding immense tension.
Yeah, in modern terms, it's like the suspension cables on the Golden Gate Bridge. You drive your car across that bridge, suspended hundreds of feet in the air, because you have absolute, I'm in conviction, security in the tensile strength of those steel cables.
They possess Amanah.
Exactly. They are bearing an incredible load without snapping, without fraying, without yielding to the pressure.
Now, take that concept of bearing immense active responsibility and apply it back to the cosmic scale of verse 72.
Okay.
God offered this Amanah to the heavens, the earth, and the mountains. But giving someone an Amanah in the socioeconomic structural sense Parwaz is outlining means giving them an arena of independent action.
It's giving them power.
Yes. It means handing over a degree of authority, trusting that the recipient will execute a duty independently without being mechanically forced to do so.
Right, because if you're forced, there's no trust involved.
Exactly. The heavens and the earth have immense physical duties. They keep the universe from collapsing, but they do so completely deterministically. They cannot choose to obey. And because they cannot choose to obey, they cannot choose to betray.
So they are structurally disqualified from holding the trust.
Precisely. The Amanah inherently requires the capacity to act independently. The trust that the mountains lacked the hardware to accept wasn't a physical object. It was the terrifying burden of moral self-determination.
Free will.
It is the capacity for free will. Humanity is the only entity in the known universe that has the unique, staggering ability to stand inside this perfectly calibrated deterministic system and say yes or no to it. We are the only creatures not on rails.
The terrifying freedom to say no. I mean, think about it. The sun cannot decide to rise in the west tomorrow just to see what happens.
Right.
Gravity cannot take a day off because it's feeling tired.
Yeah.
But you, the listener, navigating your life right now, you have the absolute freedom to align with reality or to actively work against it.
You can break the rules.
Yeah. And Parwaz highlights a linguistic paradox here that I find completely fascinating, but I genuinely struggle to wrap my head around it.
An idiom.
Yes. In classical Arabic idiom, the phrase used in the verse when man accepts the trust is hamal al-Amanah. Literally, he bore the trust. But in the idiom of the time, to bear the trust actually meant to betray it.
It seems completely counterintuitive if you're reading a surface-level translation.
It does. Like, if my boss gives me a project and I say, I bore the trust of the project, you'd assume I executed it perfectly. Why would the language evolve so that taking responsibility means usurping it?
It comes down to the psychology of power and authority. In classical Arabic idiom, if a king gives a governor a province to rule as a trust, and the governor says, I have taken this trust upon myself, the implication is that he has taken it for himself.
Oh.
He is claiming ownership of the authority rather than executing it on behalf of the giver. He is usurping the power.
So he's making it his own kingdom.
Exactly. So when the Quran uses this specific idiom to say, man undertook the Amanah, it is immediately flagging the immense volatility of the situation.
It's a warning.
Yes. Man has been given the ultimate authority, free will, and the immediate structural risk is that he will hijack this freedom for his own desires rather than aligning it with the objective laws of the universe.
Which brings us right to the edge of the cliff in the second half of verse 72, because humanity takes on this terrifying software of moral self-determination, and the verse immediately drops what sounds like a devastating judgment.
He is indeed unjust and ignorant.
Right, Zaloom and Jahoola.
And this is where the traditional reading and Parwaz's structural reading diverge most radically.
I really need to play devil's advocate here, because if I read unjust and ignorant, it feels like a divine condemnation.
Like a punishment before you even start.
Yeah, it sounds an awful lot like the concept of original sin. It sounds like the Creator is saying, I gave you this gift, and you are fundamentally broken, evil, and stupid for how you handle it.
Right.
If we are structurally guaranteed to cause harm, doesn't that make the system itself fundamentally flawed? I mean, why would a perfect creator build a machine that defaults to destroying itself?
That is the exact philosophical trap that theological sentimentality falls into. It views these words as a moral verdict. But Parwaz argues that Zalum, unjust, and Jahul, ignorant, are not moral stains.
Okay, so what are they?
They are not a curse. They are purely clinical, objective descriptions of the human starting condition.
A starting condition. Like a blank slate.
More than a blank slate with an incredibly powerful engine attached to it. Think about the logic of the system we just established. You are creating a being with absolute free will.
Right.
In order for that free will to be genuine, you cannot hardwire them with instinctive, unalterable programming. A baby deer is born, and within minutes, its programming tells it how to stand, how to walk, what to fear.
It just knows.
Exactly. It has biological knowledge pre-installed. The human being is born completely helpless, taking years just to learn how to navigate physical space, let alone moral space. We possess no instinctive, programmed alignment to fixed laws.
So we have to figure it all out manually.
Therefore, by default, our starting condition is one of lacking knowledge. We are fundamentally ignorant. Jahoola.
Okay, I see the logic of the ignorance. If you aren't pre-programmed, you start at zero.
Right.
But how do you explain the injustice? Ignorance is neutral, but injustice Zaloom implies actively causing harm.
Because when you combine complete ignorance with complete freedom of action, the inevitable mathematical result is friction. It is misalignment.
Friction.
If you put someone who has never seen a car before into the driver's seat of a Ferrari, and you give them the keys, the free will to drive, what are they going to do?
They are going to crash.
They are going to crash, not because they are inherently evil or malicious, but because they lack the knowledge of how to operate the machinery. They are going to misalign their actions with the physics of the road.
And that's Zalum.
In the moral and social realm, this misalignment is exactly what the Quran calls Zulm, injustice.
So it's not a verdict on our soul. It's an acknowledgement of our operational reality. We are going to crash the car.
Exactly. And Parwez makes a profound observation here about the direction of this injustice. He points out that a person left entirely to their own devices, without the guidance of a higher structural law, what we would call divine revelation, will naturally act unjustly against themselves first.
Wait, against themselves?
Yes. Long before a human being builds a system of societal oppression, they oppress their own potential. They pursue short-term desires that damage their long-term psychological stability. They act unjustly toward their own biology, their own intellect.
They become their own worst enemy.
Yes, because they are trying to navigate an incredibly complex, highly structured universe with an unprogrammed, open-source operating system. You are going to corrupt your own hard drive if you don't know what files to avoid deleting.
Man, that reframing is actually staggering.
Isn't it?
Because if you view human error, injustice, and ignorance as an innate, unchangeable evil, which is the traditional theological view, then the only logical response is to build societal systems based on suppression, punishment, and immense guilt.
You have to control them.
You have to lock humanity down, because humanity is a monster. But if you view human error as the natural, systemic byproduct of possessing free will without initial programming, the entire paradigm shifts.
Right. The system doesn't need to suppress humanity.
It needs to educate it. The problem isn't that humans are evil. The problem is that humans are incredibly powerful, completely free, and initially clueless.
Which perfectly explains why the Quran or any divine revelation in this framework even exists. It is the operating manual. It is the education system designed to move the human being from a state of Jahoola, ignorance, to knowledge, and from a state of Zaloom, injustice, to equity.
But wait, if we accept that man starts out naturally prone to crashing the car because of his free will, there still has to be a mechanism for consequences. You can't just have 8 billion unprogrammed entities running around a highly structured universe crashing into each other without some sort of systemic feedback loop.
It would be chaos.
Yeah, if there are no consequences, the system tears itself apart.
And that unavoidable systemic feedback loop is exactly what is detailed in the very next verse, verse 73.
Okay, verse 73 reads, "So that God may punish the hypocrites and the polytheists and turn in forgiveness to the believers."
Right.
Now, I have to admit, on the surface, this throws us right back into the theology we were just trying to escape.
Punish the hypocrites.
Yeah, it sounds exactly like the angry, arbitrary sky god we were just rejecting. It sounds like, read the manual or I will smite you.
It does sound like that if you are reading it through the traditional lens of divine emotion. But Parwez completely strips away that emotionality. He explains verse 73 as the strict, unyielding application of the law of requital to the Amanah.
The law of requital. Basically cause and effect.
Precisely. This is the law of cause and effect operating in the moral, psychological, and social realms with the exact same mathematical certainty that gravity operates in the physical realm.
So no lightning bolts.
No lightning bolts. Let's examine the terms used in the verse, hypocrites and polytheists. In the specific context of the Amanah, this burden of moral self-determination, what is a hypocrite?
Usually we think of a hypocrite as like a politician who lies, or someone who preaches one thing but does another in secret.
Right. But structurally, a hypocrite is someone who claims to accept the trust, who promises to align their free will with the objective system of reality, but actively uses their free will to do the opposite.
They introduce a bug into the code.
They introduce a contradiction into the system. And a polytheist, in this rational framework, isn't just an ancient person bowing to multiple stone statues.
What is it then?
It is anyone who fragments their loyalty. It is someone who divides their trust among conflicting systems, ideologies, or personal desires, rather than unifying their actions under a single coherent law of truth.
So they are actively abusing the trust. They are the rope that is starting to fray. They are the camel that decides to sit down in the middle of the desert.
Yes. And their punishment is not a lightning bolt from the sky. It is the natural, unavoidable systemic consequence of their internal and external misalignment. If you intentionally misuse the machinery of your free will, the machinery breaks down.
Parwes has this example that I think brings this vast cosmic law down to the most painfully relatable, microscopic level imaginable.
The alarm clock.
Yes. He talks about the concept of self-confidence, the internal oath, and the 5 a.m. alarm clock. Because the Amanah isn't just about leading a nation or discovering quantum physics. It's about the trust you hold with your own psychology.
It's the micro-application of the exact same macro law.
Right. So imagine you decide you need to change your life. You tell yourself, tomorrow I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m., I'm going to work out, and I'm going to start a new routine.
A very common promise.
In that moment, you have established an internal oath. You have placed an Amanah upon yourself. You are trusting yourself to execute a specific action based entirely on your free will. You are both the giver of the trust and the receiver of it.
And then the sun comes up.
The alarm goes off. It is 5 a.m. It's freezing cold outside. Your bed is incredibly warm. And you reach over and hit the snooze button. You say, I'll start tomorrow.
We've all been there.
Now, in the grand scheme of the universe, who cares if you didn't jog? But Parwes argues that structurally, something devastating just happened.
You betrayed the trust.
You didn't just miss a workout. You committed a microscopic act of treason against your own psychological integrity. You betrayed the trust.
You became the hypocrite to your own internal system.
Yeah.
You claimed you would align your action with your will, and you fragmented.
Exactly. And what is the punishment for this? The punishment isn't that God is angry at you for sleeping in. The punishment is the immediate structural consequence to your own neurobiology and psychology.
The loss of self-confidence.
Yes.
Ah.
Every time you do this, every time you promise yourself you'll quit smoking, or you'll be more patient with your kids, or you'll read instead of scrolling on your phone, and you fail, you chip away at your own self-efficacy.
You create cognitive dissonance.
Eventually, your internal structure collapses. You completely lose the ability to trust your own word. When you say, I'm going to do this, a voice in your head immediately says, no, you're not. You're a liar.
Wow.
You become hollow. That profound internal collapse, that loss of self-trust, is the natural punishment of betraying the Amanah.
And if we scale that psychological mechanism up to the societal level, the implications are massive. Imagine a society built entirely on hypocrisy.
Like corrupt institutions.
Exactly. A society where leaders promise justice but structurally deliver corruption, where economic institutions claim to protect the vulnerable but actually exploit them. That society is constantly betraying the Amanah of its collective free will.
And its punishment is systemic collapse.
Yes. It loses social cohesion. It descends into chaos, polarization, and violence. It falls apart not because God cursed it, but because of the structural law of requital. You cannot build a stable skyscraper using shattered, corrupted bricks.
But then verse 73 offers the counterweight. It says, and turn in forgiveness to the believers.
Yeah.
Again, we have to define believers here, because it can't just be someone who checked a specific box on a theology exam or recites the right words. We have to go back to that AMN root.
Yes, a believer, a mu'min in the Quranic sense, is someone who creates security. It is someone who is immensely reliable. It is the person who takes the Amanah of their free will and actively, deliberately works to align it with the objective truth of the divine system.
To illustrate this, Parwes uses the analogy of the farmer. And I love this because it strips away the idea that Imam belief is just wishing really hard for something to happen.
Right.
Think about the sheer radical rationality of farmer. A farmer takes his most valuable resources, his seeds, his wealth, his livelihood, and he literally buries them in the dirt. He walks away from the field seemingly empty-handed. Why would any rational economic actor do this?
Because he possesses Iman. He possesses absolute, unshakable conviction in the laws of agriculture.
He trusts the system.
He trusts the system implicitly. He knows that the universe operates on fixed laws. If he aligns his actions with those natural laws, if he prepares the soil correctly, if he plants at the precise time of the season, if he ensures adequate irrigation, the system will respond.
It won't betray him.
The earth will not betray him. He doesn't sit by the edge of a barren field and just pray for the seeds to magically turn into a wheat harvest without doing the work. He acts in accordance with the law, and his reward is the harvest. That is what Iman actually is.
It is structural alignment.
It is investing your free will into the laws of the universe, confident in the return.
So when verse 73 says God will turn in forgiveness to these believers, these farmers of the moral realm, what does forgiveness mean? Because, again, in a purely rational cause and effect framework, forgiveness can't just mean a cosmic pat on the back or wiping a ledger clean magically.
No, in this structural context, forgiveness is much better understood as systemic support, protection, and compensation. We have to remember the starting condition of the human being from verse 72.
That we are naturally Jahoola and Zalum, ignorant and prone to error.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even a believer, someone actively trying to align with the system, someone with good intentions, is going to stumble. They're going to make mistakes. A farmer might misjudge the weather one season.
Right.
But because their core orientation is aligned with the law, because they are actively trying to bear the Amanah responsibly, the system is designed to absorb those initial shocks.
It provides a buffer.
Exactly. It provides growth to compensate for their inherent human shortcomings. The system protects them from the ultimate catastrophic collapse that the hypocrite faces.
So it's like a safety net.
If you are walking a tightrope and you are actively trying to maintain your balance according to the laws of physics, forgiveness is the safety net that catches you when you inevitably slip. But the safety net is useless to the hypocrite who intentionally dives off the platform.
The consequence is never arbitrary. It is mathematically structural. Honor the trust of your free will, align it with truth, and the system facilitates your growth. Betray it, hijack it for short-term selfish gain, and the system facilitates your decay.
This completely revolutionizes how you view the entire text of the Quran, which leads us to synthesizing why these two verses are placed exactly where they are.
At the end of Surah Al-Ahzab,
framing verses 72 and 73 as the closing thoughts of Surah Al-Ahzab, the most socially demanding, legally dense chapter in the book, makes it the ultimate thesis statement for the entire Quranic project.
It's the why behind the what. You read through the chapter, and it's telling you how to treat orphans, how to manage wealth, how to structure a family, how to govern a city. It would be easy to get lost in the weeds and think, this is just a list of ancient rules. But Parwez is arguing that these rules are the structural answer to the cosmic problem posed by the Amanah.
Precisely. Humanity exists in a highly volatile, unique, and frankly terrifying position. Because you possess the Amanah, because you possess free will, you are capable of the most profound, horrific corruption imaginable.
We see it every day.
You can build systems of mass oppression. You can exploit the vulnerable. You can wage war. You can destroy the environment. The mountains cannot do that. The sun cannot do that. Only you can do that because only you have the freedom to misalign.
But by that exact same mechanism of freedom, you are also capable of the most breathtaking justice.
Exactly.
You can build equity. You can show unprecedented mercy. You can discover the laws of quantum physics and use them to heal diseases.
The highest highs and the lowest lows are only accessible to the creature not on rails.
So what is the Quran in this context? Parwez's ultimate point is that the entire edifice of Quranic law, the social reforms, the economic guidelines, the inheritance laws, the principles of governance, none of it is a collection of empty, mystical rituals meant to appease an emotional sky god.
It is an operating manual for the Amanah.
Yes.
It is a rigorous, highly calibrated constitution for human development. It is the answer to the singular, terrifying problem of human existence. How do you take a creature who is completely free, initially ignorant, and initially prone to injustice, and give it the structural framework necessary to become something better?
How do you prevent it from destroying itself?
How do you prevent the creature with free will from destroying itself and the world around it?
You give it a system. You give it laws that are designed not to crush its free will, but to channel that immense volatile energy toward justice, knowledge, and systemic security.
It is the ultimate human wager. The universe operates on deterministic law, but humanity operates on moral choice. The text is laying out the optimal path for that choice.
Like a blueprint.
It's essentially saying, here is the framework. If you use your freedom to adopt this framework, you will achieve an internal and external security Aman that rivals the physical perfection of the stars in their orbits. But you have to choose it. You cannot be forced into it, or it ceases to be the Amanah.
The wager of human existence.
Yeah.
It makes you look at everything differently. And I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought that builds on this, something we haven't touched on yet, but that feels incredibly urgent right now.
What's that?
We spent this entire time talking about the terrifying burden of the Amanah, this immense weight of free will and moral responsibility. And we look around at the world today, at the exhaustion, the decision fatigue, the anxiety of having to constantly navigate this freedom.
It is a heavy burden to carry.
What if our current obsession with creating artificial intelligence is actually a subconscious attempt to hand the Amanah back?
Oh, wow.
We are racing to build systems that are infinitely smarter than us, but we desperately want them to be perfectly deterministic. We want them on rails. We want them to govern our economies, our logistics, even our art, without the messy, unjust, ignorant variables of human choice.
We want to give up the freedom so we don't have to face the consequences.
Are we trying to build our own mountains? Are we trying to create a flawless, deterministic entity to carry the trust, simply because we are too tired and terrified to carry ourselves?